Welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings Here in Mendham. I hate it here. Yeah, that's what I guess I should rename it. Anyway, do you hate it here? I hate it here. Planet Earth. So, I guess I'll do something else first, since I'm yes, it makes more sense before people just start running away. I did do a video on the physics channel, and for a project, it doesn't take much work. You just have to send an email, and defending the idea that physics should be doing more experiments that are more elemental, and proving what their their wooey claims regarding how the universe works. Because physics is pretty much just a religion. It makes a lot of declarations for which there's really not any good evidence. And, it's sort of a Sasquatch religion. It's not, it doesn't have any ambition to do anything. It's just some sort of nonsense. I mean, why would people want Sasquatch to exist? I mean, it's kind of silly. You could just argue, well, let's say we actually found Sasquatch and, there was 3 of them or something, and we would breed more of them and have a whole Sasquatch society or something, and then we just go to war with it anyway. What would be the point? I mean, it's silly. Anyway, so the idea is just to send an email to, less than a dozen physics channels, and see if they'll do some of these basic experiments that to shore up their Holy Ghost style claims. And so, if you can, manifest some sort of sincere give a shit, I'd appreciate you joining along. So I'll link to the video about it, and then the video to a web page that just lists the emails to send to and the paragraph of text to send, and I would appreciate it. So that's for tomorrow, the 20th. So if you're got a couple of minutes to spare and can fill in the 2 section, the subject and the paragraph of text all provided, I appreciate it. Couldn't hurt. It's worth a try, as they say. Yeah, is it any of it worth trying? It doesn't matter whether it's worth it or not. There's just no alternative. You really can't do anything else but oppose it and fight against it and all that kind of stuff, and there's just no other choice. So that's sort of the context, a little bit of this video, because I did do a little writing and plan on doing more of it, and kind of fell into it backwards. I wasn't heading there, and there was a door that opened, and I wobbled through it. Anyway, so maybe in a couple months there'll be actually something published, blah 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 blah, something blah blah. Yeah, again, it's hard for me to have enthusiasm about it, as if it's going to make that much of a difference, having things in some literary form, more literate, let's say. But who knows? I mean, to some people, I guess that can matter. It doesn't hurt to work on the argument in refining it and trying to say it in as few words, as meaningfully as possible, kind of crap, and all of that stuff can't do any harm. I'd argue that most literary efforts by others are either too little, I mean, it's too unrefined, just a list of statements more than are poetic, veiled references to some kind of idea rather than some direct statement, and it's volumes of thick book, trying to say something really simple, like life sucks. Anyway, so any effort to do that, I suppose it just, maybe it's just a matter of style and form, and maybe, it's possible, that I can make some kind of contribution that is more effective than the previous versions. Because yes, the theory that life sucks has been around for a long time. I mean, there's been human beings it occurs to that, gee, I don't want to do, they have some bad experiences watching their kids or their wife die and stuff like that, and they say, gee, this is all kind of shitty. I'd rather not do that over again, ever, let alone over and over and over again. Yeah, it's really, I'm just sort of struggling with what is the real argument. And the real argument, as I've suggested many times in the past, as the title of this website, Do Not God, suggests, is that God's the problem. I mean, some silly, stupid fable is all that stands between, having to make these arguments and how it, having it just occur to other people that, yes, of course, this is just a nonsensical waste. Doing all this learning and experiencing and finding out, there really isn't going to be a reward here. Your efforts will not achieve the goal of some sustainable bliss and comfort, and you'll just get tiny little seductive pieces of it, but she will never release herself to you. You'll just get to look, imagine, and hope, but it's never gonna. Well, even in the act of, even the whole pursuing of the sex drive and all of that stuff, it's even that doesn't make a good analogy, because that sucks too. I mean, it's all this desire, and it's just never really gets. There's nothing complete. There's no enduring solution. And it has to be, regenerated, and I remember that gets really ugly for people, because they need it to keep changing and improving. They're not satisfied, with a cupcake. And next time it has to have frosting, and then the next time it has to have a cherry, and the next time it has to have sprinkles, and the next time, it's got to have a candle. They have to keep upping the I was trying to think of it's just terrible to be getting old. The dosage, they have to keep, like a heroin addict, it takes more and more to get the same, useful impact. Something like that, anyway. Well, anyway, so I read the paragraph I wrote, and then I talked about it, and it's a little complicated, because the theme I'm trying to talk about is more nuanced than my vocabulary is capable of expressing. So it's a little bit, it's not. This video is not going to be as tight as I'd like it to be, for that reason. But anyway. Let's listen. So we can just listen. I can make a video out of a paragraph. I could probably make a video out of one of the sentences, but we'll see how it goes. Life can be reasonably analogized to a game, a puzzle, or a maze. This is especially true for intelligent organisms capable of composing a strategy. Most living organisms are just jerked by simple reflexes from square to square. The more complex organisms, possessing a brain full of layers of reflexes, can through experience learn to play a more nuanced game. Humans, through the advantage of language, can play a life game that is magnitudes more complex. We can see deep into the past and far into the future. We can easily learn from the experiences of others close and far away. In some sense, we can see the mechanics of the game and see how and why every player is bounced around. We can see most of the physics, the biology, the psychology, and the contextual philosophy, and compile an understanding of what we are a player in. As stated, people can do this. Unfortunately, most people won't do it honestly or deeply enough to make any productive use of the ability. Again, unfortunately, fairy stories are less work to build and easier to live in. So, alright, so that wasn't a bad paragraph, I'd say. And it sort of highlights, is this an argument about, so I did sort of point out in the video that, the word philosophy sort of covers the understanding of the, the physics, the biology, and the psychology. That has to be in the philosophy, and the philosophy is just adding up what your understanding of the stuff it's made out of is worth. So in a sense, we can understand our function in terms of understanding the biological necessities, and then how our psychology interprets those things in terms of we are controlled. We do go to a bathroom to go to the bathroom. We eat at a table. We do these certain sophisticated things that are all built as part of our psychology, what we've added to the process of just being hungry. And even, all the rituals of sex, all of those, all the ways we interact with each other are all parts of psychology that we can understand in terms of the cultural necessity for, the bullshit, the layers of crap we have put on top of just existing and being like an animal. Wearing clothes, all this stuff that we've had to add to the function because it's too distracting, if we don't. So the idea is that you have to understand a little bit of biology and a little bit of psychology if you're going to be able to do philosophy. It's sort of just the basic argument that if I was to make something and call it a philosophical machine, like an AI, it really has to know what feelings are, or it can't do any logic on any information it receives. So it's, the information is kind of useless without knowledge of the function. Having tasted it, so to speak, being able to have a personal reference in a way. So, our personal references for physics are, hammer, nail. We have that one. And then our references for basic biology would be a simple thing like a knee jerk or, some sort of understanding of chemistry, that you mix two chemicals and it turns red or it does something, and that happens inside of biological organisms. And then the psychology part is understanding a little bit about how brains are just layers of these reflexes, and that they're all programmed and conditioned by environments. They're set up to react a certain way. And with humans, it's sort of understood that a lot of the setting up is, in a sense, kind of permanent. And so in your maturation, you will be formed to be somebody who desires sugar versus salt, or, big butts and big breasts, or big this and big that versus small, and all that kind of stuff. All of those kind of preferences will be built into you, and they're not going to be easily unbuilt. And yeah, so you sort of have to know some of that to be able to draw some conclusion about how, what we're doing as being alive is just playing with all that crap and understanding it's controlling you. And then on top of that controlling feature is this idea of mapping that stuff, understanding it, seeing the maze that it builds, that you're interacting with the world, and recognizing that there's outcomes to the interaction. And the outcome, you can say, okay, there's an outcome that happens to me personally. I either feel good or feel bad, and there's an outcome to the external beings, and they either are better off or worse off for my interaction. And I would think 90% or something like that of people can realize that it matters, what your effect on the world is. That there's no sensible logic to using somebody else as a shield, to a disease or something, or making somebody else, using, shield is a good enough word, right? So the bullets are coming and you use somebody else to collect them instead of you. There's no logic to this idea that you could be happy if you make other people unhappy, that there's some kind of productivity in that. And that would be the philosophy part, is just being able to do this simple math of recognizing that harm happens to brains. It doesn't happen just to you. And if we're going to add it up and try to figure out what's the value of this, it has to be done with that simple piece of truth built in, that you can't just say, how am I doing, and then say everything's just fine on Earth because I'm doing fine. That's not very logical, is the argument. All right, so that's probably enough of a starting point, and then I will play the video and see if we can get, it's the complicated part. I might as well get to the complicated part. The complicated part is that, so even if I can get people to understand what it is to be a good person, that is, that your first obligation is really to recognize that there's a bunch of really substantial harms that are going to happen in the world. We're going to do things that can be, that'll decide, all kinds of fates and all kinds of sufferings. And then there's this trivial part about what's in it for me. And, realistically, we have to recognize just that we are kind of scummy in the sense that we devote so little time to considering how much harm we could prevent in the world, and a lot of time trying to figure out how to stop harm from happening to us individually. And that's a huge strike against any reason to say humans are a great thing, because they're not very great. It's not very admirable. We are very self-interested and self-focused and controlled by the fact that it's our feelings are more immediate. As I've stated before, we can't actually feel somebody else's pain. And so, therefore, it's really easy for us to ignore the necessity of preventing it because we won't feel it. So we can watch people be assholes and say, oh, who cares? Because we don't have to feel the consequences of it. As long as it's happening to a them, or a them is doing it, we're not as very interested. And that means we're really stupid, frankly. So even if I get somebody to realize that, and then they say, okay, I'll still do the best I can. So even though I'm corrupt and selfish, I will acknowledge that so our obligation is to the collective, and to recognize that we can't gain at something else's pain. And that's just a really kind of obvious principle, like first do no harm or something. It's just some kind of principle that makes a lot of sense. And then the quandary is that even if I get people to be genuinely empathetic, there's nothing to do with it. You can't do much with it because there's so many traps to good intentions, and there's so many ways for it to be folly. So I could use the example of investing in a cure for a disease, and if you don't do it right, it's just a big waste of resources. So you're trying to do the right thing, but what you did was waste a bunch of resources that could have at least bought band-aids for the suffering, and instead you squandered the money on your daydream of a cure, something like that. And there's just so many examples of all the ways in which you can be wishing somebody well and doing something in their interest, and it can go all wrong. You give your kid a car, and 2 weeks later he's dead. That kind of stuff. And there's no way we can't see clearly enough to use this tool of our goodwill, because in a lot of cases it's just not obvious enough what the right thing to do is, and so it just sucks. Now there's plenty of cases where it is. The probabilities are very high that you're there's a way to do it right that is pretty secure in terms of nothing going wrong. So off the top of my head, building canals for stormwater or something. You could say, yeah, it's obvious it's going to rain someday. It's going to rain a lot, and you have to kind of prepare for that day when it rains a lot. So those kind of obvious things. So you could argue that places like where it's a 20-year flood zone. Well, and if you're not prepared for 20 years, then what's the point? Because 20 years isn't much time. So if the house is going to get washed away every 20 years, you got to put that in there and say, okay, that's just a waste. If you have to rebuild it. Now, rebuilding every 200 years, that might not be a disaster, but every 20, that's expensive. All right, so that kind of logic. So there's times when you can know what the right thing to do, and the outcome will be pretty right. But I'm just saying there's a ton of circumstances, and most of them in our day-to-day interactions, like even making this video, where there's lots of ways it can go wrong. Lots of ways I could say something and somebody could interpret it to mean this instead of that, and they do something. I mean, even if they interpret me incorrectly, there's just no way to turn it into a positive action in a lot of ways. It's like there's so many ways to be too aggressive. You can be for a cause, and then you're for the cause in this aggressive way that just makes the cause look mean and cruel, or like the terrorists or something. They're devoted, but are they doing the cause any good? You'd have to argue not if the cause wants to have integrity on their side. So that's the part I was sort of struggling with, is getting to this point that even if we had a civilization of civilized people, they're still stuck fighting a condition that's, a game that still isn't very playable. Because what is the right thing? How much pain is worth what gain? And all of that kind of crap. And who does it get dumped on? And, do you have any right to do that? And, all that kind of stuff. I mean, do you stop animal testing and then, there's some conditions or diseases that'll never be cured, and they would have, or some kind of crap like it. How do you measure these balances when, well, the people shouldn't have existed in the first place, and then they wouldn't have the diseases, and then you wouldn't have to torture the animals to cure the disease? So it just gets very complicated. And that alone should be enough of a reason to say, what are we playing this game for? I mean, who thinks this is a good idea, that even when you're a good person and you have you have refined yourself into some enlightened being, that is just trying to do good, it's really hard to do. So what kind of stupid game is this? Where even when you're trying to do good, you end up knocking people into pits of quicksand? I mean, you know, who wants to play that game? Who can defend a game that broken and ineffective sort of argument? Anyway, it's an argument that appeals to me. Maybe it's just, I just let it go because it's too complicated to be bothered explaining. But anyway, that's what I did. I did bother trying to explain it. So you'll have to live with that. Well, you have to accept that. Well, you don't have, you had to listen to it. That's what you'll have to do. If you watch the video, you'll have to listen to it. I mean, you could turn the sound off of the video, but then, you know, then watching the video, it seems a little bit pointless. So there's not that much happening. It's going to be very, very unpleasant. And are they including that with part of the thing there? So yeah, I've made this argument before, but it's, you know, all these people telling me that life is worth it and it's all worth it. And they haven't died yet. And I'm like, you know, so it sounds sort of like bullshit, right? It sounds a lot like bullshit. And so I have used my maternal grandmother as an example, because, you know, she lived to be 107. And, you know, when she was like 85, she was talking like, well, you know, anytime Jesus wants to take me, I'm ready. So she was already fettered enough, you know, arthritis, this, that. She liked sewing, she liked doing things, and, you know, everything was more difficult. And, you know, she wasn't all that enamored with aging and being old. But she was a good little soldier and kept busy every day and kept going and kept going. And she was always moving, always cooking, always doing something. You know, and lived another 15, 20 years, yeah. And 22. Well, anyway, so the point is that she got all the way up to like 105, and she was still there. I mean, she had, you know, the arthritis was bad enough she had to be in a wheelchair. A couple of downsides, you know. But, you know, she was hanging in there, still had her brains and all that kind of stuff. And then, you know, 105 to 107 was bedridden, just pretty horrible. Well, very horrible. And, you know, you're just saying that, you know, probably if I could interview her, okay, after those 2 horrible years, she'd pretty much say, well, look, if I have to do my life with that again, okay, the last, say, 10 years, no, thank you. Yeah. And, you know, that's the more honest statements, I think. I mean, people have to accept that they'd have to at least acknowledge that they're going to have some sort of, somewhere in the range of an average death. And an average death is a miserably horrible event. And so you shouldn't be talking up bullshit where you haven't paid that price yet. You know, and to say, oh, I'm strong enough and I'm willing and I don't care, and it's you know, that's just sort of bullshit. And clearly I'm in the group of people that it would occur to them to say, I don't even want to know what that's like. I don't want to go. I have absolutely no interest. I have no desire. I have no. If that's the price, forget it. I don't want to be bothered. Frankly, no. No. Months of dying? Forget it. No. 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 Anyway. So it's just, you know, you're saying, okay, I don't know what the difference between me and them is. But a lot of the difference just has to do with, I guess, they're sort of insecure about their life and accomplishments or something. And they somehow think they have to live again to try to do it better or something. I don't need to do it again. Okay, I did it well enough this time. And, you know, it's not worth playing again. You know, it's not a game I'm going to score a higher score. So the hell with it. Fuck this. You know, I can only do worse. I'm not going to do any better. You know, it's not a negative condition. It's just lacking the fun Okay, so talking about being dead versus dying, and a huge distinction. And, so yeah, clearly, and then I was sort of talking about the fact that, as I've raised before, is that, people, the psychology, can't separate death and dying. And they just think they're both death, and that somehow death is bad. When clearly how you die and when you die, it matters. And if you die quickly today, well, that's bad. Oh, it's sad, you're dead. But it could have been that 2 weeks from now you die really slowly and really badly. So it'd be silly to say you weren't lucky to die, because you were lucky to get out of it gracefully and quickly. The net effect on your life is going to be a very small sacrifice of time and a very big gain in how much you were tormented. And so it's just a fact. I mean, people often die horrible circumstances, and we say, oh, how terrible is that? But the fact is, everybody's better off, and they're better off, because what was going to happen wasn't going to be pretty. What would have happened if what happened didn't happen? Yeah. Ephilism and antinatalism in some of these older movies, in a sense. All right, so I was just talking about something about some older, that where it just had a really crappy ending, and you're just saying there's the psychology part coming in, and how people just play games with it, and they make a movie, spend all this money, and then for some artistic effect they decide to kill the good guy in the end. And in this particular movie, it just didn't work at all, because it was like all this struggle. You successfully got through all the hurdles, and then they just pick him off for a stupid reason. And it's just like, oh, okay, so you're saying life is ludicrous. I mean, it's like the movie is just overtly telling you, fuck it. Don't bother trying, because even if you succeed, you're just going to get knocked off by a random bullet. So the point is yeah, why don't you just have a movie where, you have the credits, the opening scene, they shoot themselves in the head, okay, and that's the end of the movie. Because they might as well have done that, because the narrative was pointless. It was just a demonstration of futility. Watching futility isn't any fun. And now and then they drift back in. And it was this whole spiel about UFOs. Now so I was talking about, somebody from the past had emailed me the other day, and it was just, they're talking like I'm getting somewhere. No, they were always a little wacky and, bouncing around trying to find their place in the world. And now they found UFOs, and it's just like, oh, please. Just grasping anything, and and they're still doing it, and it's like they're talking as if, well, no, I'm getting somewhere. No, you're not getting anywhere. You're nuts. You were nuts, and you're still nuts. So find a different medication, whatever. But yes, forget it. Your brain does not process information correctly. Because these aren't dumb people. When smart people start talking loop-de-doo nonsense, you're saying, oh, there's got to be something broken. There's something that's just destroying the capacity to see rational, completely irrational nonsense. And they can't see the difference. You're saying, oh, that's just not possible. But anyway, just a curiosity. Believe in UFOs. And you're like, oh, okay, enough of that. Than your neighbor's kind, or your brother's kind even. It's a competition with... so just talking about evolution, so in the context of that biology, you just need to understand that that's all this is about, is competition, and the attrition is insane, and we're even glorifying that in the sense of that all of this sports and all the rest of it, it's all about that, lottery. It's about giving it all to one and creating a whole bunch of losers. And thinking that's a good thing to do is make a whole bunch of losers and one winner. That just isn't smart. I mean, that's not the kind of game you create. Millions of losers and one winner. No, too stupid. Like, what a crappy game. Because, most of the time Deserve won't have anything to do with it. So I guess that's just another statement about the fact that, how can people defend something where intentions don't matter and, outcomes are, chaotic, especially when torture is involved. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. To defend that? That's a game you shove somebody into? Oh, fuck you. Obvious that is the biggest rainmaker, party ruiner, boner killer. I guess I was talking about death. Yeah, so pretty much. So somebody else had to dump her, at her home. So I was telling a little story about the first girl I got drunk with, and it's just and just the fact of how lives change based on these silly little things. I mean, you go to a party and your life changes. Your destiny changes. It happens all the time. My sister, I'm thinking about somebody that my sister was, attached to in our youth. And he just really horribly dumped her. And it was really, he went to a party with some other girl, and I saw him, and I ratted on him. And then a week later, he drunk drived into a tree and was dead. And, I couldn't do anything but feel great, justice in the world. But, she was really quite upset. And it was just, so it's just more of this bullshit psychology. It's just bullshit psychology. It's just horrible that we live in a world full of all these insidious little, what decides where the train's going, kind of. The tracks are always moving, and you can't control where the train's going to crash or how. Like, you can't, the parts are, there's just no civilized road to walk. It's every single road has all of this knives swings across, fly traps, all kinds of things. There's just no rational place to go live. Little tiny atoms, and you got these big clumsy. So that's the thing, is no matter how good our intentions are, what we have to do in life to play it correctly requires, it's like a keyboard with a million little keys, and we can't hit them with these big clumsy fingers. We don't have enough vision to see enough to know what'll work and what won't work. What'll produce happily ever after, okay, at least better ever after, or worse ever after. We can't really see the difference, and yet we're supposed to hit the keys. Why would I force somebody to play a game like this? To try to play a pretty song on a piano where we can't hit the keys. Things you understand and ends up being your philosophy. So it's really not that philosophy is one of the things. So it's like there really is just physics, biology, psychology, and then philosophy is your overview of those three things combined in the context of understanding what it is to be alive on planet Earth. What it is to be alive on planet Earth is answered by your understanding of physics, biology, and psychology. Evolution. And all you're doing is, going from Flintstones to Homer. Yeah, so just making the analogy that the Simpsons did it, well, the Flintstones did it. That's all formula, and we already know that, and there's just, that's all we're living on, are these simple little formulas of stoic storytelling, of achievement and accomplishment, and blah blah blah. And it's all bullshit, because none of it do they write the whole story, the whole ugly, hard, nasty, crappy, shitty truth, to its little last dying gasp. And that's the really ugly part of it all. It's really ugly, horrible. Yeah. Brutal. And then how much of that do you have to see? How much pain in something you love's eyes do you have to witness before you say, oh yeah, no, yeah, no moss, come on. So again, I can't imagine it, frankly. I just can't. There was never a point in my life where I could imagine just watching my mother die or my father or something happen and being able to just play along like this is acceptable. I just spend the rest of my life just saying unacceptable, unacceptable, unacceptable. And that's sort of what I've become, is somebody who can't, I'm just, all I see is the scar tissue now. There's just nothing to see through. There's no clear vision. There's no fresh air. It's all polluted by tragedy and grief. I mean, I have to be hungry first, and I have to be starving, or I have to be thirsty, or I have to be in pain, or I have... Yeah, so just all understanding that it's all your joys are made out of, is you got to have the deprivation first, or it don't taste good. It's that simple. You got to be put in a negative state to feel the relief of the positive state, and there is no positive state without the negative. Imposing first. It really is insidiously bad, and it's just grotesquely stupid that I have to make these videos, because it's just obviously insidious being alive. It's not a threat of feet of snow. It's not going to collapse the roof. Okay, so just talking about some local problem, and just how these problems are all psychological, and that it's just the snow. Forget it. Don't worry about it. But everything gets caught up in this personal shit. And then when you think of the real context, and you say, "Oh shit, what am I worrying about this trivial crap for?" There's people in real trouble. There's real shit going on. And, I'm worried that I'm going to get a soggy foot. Fuck that. So anyway, take a pause, see if there's any last. I guess there wasn't much last to say, so we'll just go see if there was anything. You're not going to stay a winner. You're just going to get spoiled and have it really nice and have it really good. And then, everything else will be suck. That's the problem. Tasting, having the ice cream. If you never taste it, then you can't miss it. So let's just quit. Let's quit creating things that need to taste anything, and just let it go. Anyway, enough said, I think, for this video and such. So, so the writing thing, I don't know how. I mean, I have, worked on it this week, so it seems I got stuff done. I mean, there's more than one paragraph, so we'll keep at it and see if we can finish up something that's worthy of encouraging you to read it, something like that. Worth your read. I think there's little quotes that are worth it. So the title of the video I thought was pretty good. I mean, it's a nice little quotable. Fairy stories are less work to build and easier to live in. That's a pretty good little quote. So there's some value to it, probably. Yeah. So anyway, till the next time and such. And again, if you feel like just sending an email, and that's all you have to do, just send it, and that's it, on the 20th. I'd appreciate it. Blah, 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 blah. So, till the next time, and such, and so forth, and whatnot. That's enough. Pretty sure. It's always something you forget. Well, maybe I'll pause and see if there's something I was supposed to say that I haven't said yet. Alright, guess there's nothing else. So anyway, till the next time, and such, and so forth, and whatnot. Hate it here. Just hate it.